Hello, welcome to May 2nd. The sun is shining, the birds are singing.
Hello, hello.
We're here to act right. Act right.
Act right, act right.
Not wrong, right. Act right, as you may remember from yesterday, is the theme for this month. And today we're going to talk about be the person you want to be. Coolio.
That's fun.
Ready to dive in?
Let's start.
Epictetus says, first tell yourself what kind of person you want to be, then do what you have to do. For in nearly every pursuit, we see this to be the case. Those in athletic pursuit first choose the sport they want and then do that work.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my gosh, this is bringing up so much stuff for me. The first thing this brings up to me is, are you okay if I go into it?
Please go for it, yeah.
James Clear's Atomic Habits. His whole process for setting habits in your life is to start at the identity level, where he says you have to be very clear about the type of person you're trying to become, because then without that, your habits aren't going to stick. So that's like a really, I love that parallel here.
Mm-hmm.
Like the first tell yourself what kind of person you want to be.
So it's not just about starting some sort of a habit, but it's about it needs to start with identifying of what do you want to be, or maybe that's the goal kind of.
Yeah, see, it's like imagine like if I do all these habits, what do they all lead up to? Like what version of myself is at the end of this line? And so he recommends starting at the identity level by finishing the sentence, I'm the type of person who ...
Mm-hmm.
And this is someone you want to turn into. It's not necessarily who you are today, but if you can put it in the phrase of, I'm the type of person who takes very good care of my body. Mm-hmm. Then all of a sudden, a daily yoga practice fits into that construct in a way that's motivational, and in a way that gives purpose to the whole thing.
Yeah, that makes sense, because without it, you can't. Like I just can't imagine. Like, well, I just want to be best at some sport, so I'm just gonna be running. Like it just doesn't. Like you need to have some goal. Like what kind of an athlete do you want to become in order to then practice those things to get you to that goal? Because you can't go. You could go like people choose their college degrees with the idea of like I want to go very broad, and then kind of zero in later, right? And it's like versus some people going like, no, I'm zeroing in. I want to be a plastic surgeon as I'm entering college, right? So those guys I feel like have a better chance of actually ending up there, because it starts with this kind of like specific thing.
They do. I don't think it's necessarily wrong for you to be wide and have range. If you are like, well, I'm confused right now and I want to put myself in a position in the next few years to dial in on something that I'm interested in. So now what do I need to do to set myself up for that? I need to expose myself to a range of subjects and experiences so that I even know what's out there to choose from.
If you don't know, if you say like, well, I don't know, then I say that's a great way to go explore what you could want. But if you have this goal already, right, that you wanna, like if you're able to come up with it. Sure, I'm just saying
there's still a goal. The goal is to figure out what I want to be.
What do you want to be? Yeah. And that should be a goal. That shouldn't be this like, whatever. It's okay to not have that goal or not knowing kind of like which directions I want to go.
Right, because if I don't set the goal, this is just going to be random. life will take me in a random direction, and there's no way that wherever I'm going to end up from the randomness is someplace I actually want to be.
Right. Yeah.
Maybe I would be okay with it. Like, I could luck out and be okay with it. But will it ever be the life of my dreams? Like, high-fiving in the morning when I wake up because I'm like, oh my gosh, life is fucking awesome. Like, it's not going to be that.
Yeah.
Most likely not.
Yeah, most likely not.
I feel like life can really only be like that if I am very clear about what I'm trying to be and turning into. And that can change. That can be a fluid thing, but I should always be connected to my future.
Aiming for something.
Yeah. I should feel a connection to the future, to some future that I'm trying to manifest, and I should feel kind of being pulled towards it. But then, may I share one more thing?
Please keep going.
So the other thing that I noticed in here was because I'm reading Peter Attia's Outlive book. He has a chapter in there that he calls Objective Strategy Tactics. And he says in there, most people don't even really think of the objective level, which is what you and I were just talking about, of like, think about the person you want to be. He's like, they don't really even think at the strategy level. They just start doing shit. And so he says, like, we have this big problem where we're so tactically driven. Like, we have a problem in our life that we want to fix, and our impulse to do next is like start tinkering with the gears.
Start playing around with it. Start doing
things
instead of start thinking
about what am I trying to accomplish here? Like, what is my ideal outcome? And from that, let me devise a strategy to meet that. And then my tactics are actually things that all pull up and nest up underneath the strategy.
And that tinkering will happen.
Yes.
Once you have this defined.
Exactly.
And if you don't have this defined, you can go tinker with it, and it's just gonna not have any
impact.
Head and toe. Right.
It'll be random impact.
So it's like, how are you tinkering with it needs to be defined before you start tinkering with it.
And I've noticed this since I started reading this book, Peter's book.
Yeah, for sure.
I started noticing that in myself. Like, I'll be at work and it'll be like, oh, Brentan, what do you think? And immediately my mind is just jumping to, well, we could do this and we could do that, and we could do this, we could do that. And I have to back myself up and say, okay, hold on, what's my intended outcome here? Okay, given that intended outcome, here's what strategy do I want to employ to achieve that? What do I think will get me there? And then how does that strategy then break up into the individual tasks that need to get done in order to accomplish it? And I surprised myself with how much I was like the person Peter was talking about in the book. Because whenever I read this kind of stuff, I always want to think I'm above it, you know?
No, I always do that stuff too. I have to like walk myself back from solutioning, you know? And that's also like a cool, one of the cool things about it is that like you being there and being there for discovery of the problem is a huge part of coming up with the right solution.
Yes.
And so you might not be the person, you actually don't want to be the person who says, we should do this. It's the team who should somehow come up with it, and we should be the ones who are like helping that team to come up with it, right? So if I'm looking at it as like a project manager or something like that, right?
Sure. I mean, in these cases, it was in my wheelhouse. So like them saying, "What do you think we should do?" was because I was the one with the most information.
No.
So yeah, but I mean, every situation's different, you know? And so then it's like, my big lesson there was more about like getting back up to the objective level and the strategy, and just realizing how freaking often I'm spending in tactical land without having done that prerequisite work first.
Yeah, planning, design, develop, deploy.
What is that, SDLC?
I mean, that's like a iterative, you know,
project management
thing. But yeah, but it's like, it starts with planning. It has to. Otherwise, you don't know what you're doing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Planning,
And it doesn't have to be a long planning. It's just what is the thing that
I like what he's saying here though, of like, because planning is like this vague thing too that sometimes I'm like, well, what does planning even fucking mean? Yep. And like here it's like, okay, first tell yourself the kind of person you want to be. First figure out what your intended outcome is. You know, like, because I think like we're all on board with the idea of planning.
But what is
like everybody, and I'm finding this out hardcore because I'm taking over people's plans and like projects and stuff, and I'm like, oh, this is what planning means to this person. Oh, this is what planning means to that person. It's like this very subjective thing unless we get down to like, okay, let's start with intended outcome. As you start planning, step one. What is step one of planning is define the intended outcome. Mm-hmm. And intended outcome here, I'm putting in air quotes as a stand-in for what he's saying in the quote, as tell yourself what kind of person you want to be. Mm-hmm. Like define the intended version of yourself that you'd like to turn into.
Yeah, that's cool.
You want to see Ryan? Okay. Ryan says, an archer is highly unlikely to hit a target she did not aim for. The same goes for you, whatever you target. You are certain to miss the target if you don't bother to draw back and fire. Our perceptions and principles guide us in the selection of what we want, but ultimately our actions determine whether we get there or not. So yes, spend some time, real, uninterrupted time, thinking about what's important to you, what your priorities are. Then work toward that and forsake all the others. It's not enough to wish and hope. One must act and act right.
So aiming is one thing, and then acting is the fire.
Yes.
You know, like aim and then fire. That entire thing it's a two-step process, and both steps have to be executed in order for some sort of an outcome. Because if you can aim. If you fire without aiming, you are not going to hit the target. If you're aiming and not fire because you're hesitant or something, the longer you're aiming and not firing, the probably more tired you are of aiming, right? And so you can kind of get discouraged. Maybe tired means discouraged, maybe, or something like that.
Oh, for sure.
So I can kind of see how, like, it's aim and fire. Like you gotta action it out. Go do that thing, you know.
If you're firing without the aim, you will tire yourself out and get discouraged and quit. Mm-hmm. And I can kind of see that even like with like the yoga mastermind thing. Mm-hmm. It's like I've been trying to create my own strategy. Like that's like the middle. Like I'm clear on my objective, but like here's the strategy. I've been trying to do that part. And I've been then in tactic land trying to execute on that strategy and getting more and more tired and discouraged by it. And now I join the mastermind where her job is to give me the strategy. And with just changing that one element, I'm still the tactics person that's executing it. I have felt in the last 2 weeks of doing this, like just a rejuvenated sense of energy now that all of my actions feel like they're really being like streamlined to one place. Mm-hmm. And I can't see the result. I haven't hit the bullseye yet. But it's like I can almost see the arrow in the air and it looks like it's going closer to the target. So I'm excited to see, where it actually lands on the grid.
Yeah. And then once it lands, we re-aim and reshoot.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's no like I just one time. That's why it shouldn't feel so hesitant, because it's the hesitation of firing is essentially there because you're worried that you're not going to hit it. Well, don't worry not hitting it. Just aim for it and then fire. And then, I was close. Okay, aim and fire again, right? And see the results of it. So like the repetition is also very, very important.
Yeah.
And the repetition can only happen if you actually complete the entire cycle of aim and fire.
Yeah.
Yeah, like it.
Yeah. We can be done for sure. Yeah. I just want to follow up with one thing though, which is that like this archery example is very straightforward. You know what I mean? Like there's a bullseye that you're seeing right in front of you. It's like I just do this one thing. Like I don't want to like minimize its difficulty. Like I'm sure it's difficult to do that, but complexity wise, it's not as complex as like, you know, us in a lifestyle situation where we're like kind of, it's not clear. There's like fog where the target is or something.
Well, because the target, because imagine that you have a field that's filled with targets, right? And now,
so it's like which one do you choose?
Like in archery, the target is chosen for you. You just need to aim and shoot for it. So it's like little bit of a different analogy, but because in life, you're choosing your own targets. And
I like the idea of like a field full of targets because it does sometimes feel overwhelming, like the decision of who is it that I want to become. And so I didn't want to end this video without calling out that complexity because I have often felt kind of disheartened or overwhelmed by that before. And I don't really know if I have a solution other than like the stick with it and things will clarify eventually if you are willing to go through the painful process of living with uncertainty for a little bit. The uncertainty of not knowing who it is exactly I'm supposed to be in this world.
Or really also the uncertainty of when you release when you fire, right? Or when you release the trigger. Now there's this time from when you released it to knowing did I hit it or not?
Yeah.
Right. And so now that's the uncertainty. Now you have to, and now it's not as quick as bullet. It's not even quick as arrow. It's probably like takes months. It's like throwing a rock on the moon.
You know what I think it actually is more like in terms of speed is like the stock market.
Sure, I
actually think it's like it more resembles those cycles.
It's about to happen. Like, no, it's still not about to happen. It's about to, and then it does have something. Then it does happen, and then you do see those results because that once you release it, it is traveling, and it will tire itself, and it has to hit something at some point. So, good, very nice.
Yeah.
Cool.
All right. Alrighty, my friend, did you enjoy that? Do you have questions? Do you have other thoughts that you want to share with us? We're all ears. See you tomorrow.